At 8:09:23 hours on October 4, 2025, the USS Princeton's advanced spy radar detected something that nearly ignited World War III. A Chinese Type 052D destroyer, previously holding position at 200 kilometers, suddenly surged from 18 to 30 knots in less than 90 seconds. The John Chang's captain had just received direct orders from Beijing: intercept the Americans and force them to back down. Beijing was about to discover why confronting the U.S. Navy in open waters remains one of history's most catastrophic military miscalculations. The Nimitz Carrier Strike Group had been executing America's 75-year mission, maintaining freedom of navigation through the world's critical sea lanes, ensuring Chinese factories could ship electronics worldwide. Operating 180 nautical miles from Chinese territory in international waters where $3.4 trillion in annual trade flows freely, the strike group's mission followed standard U.S. Navy protocol: predictable routes, transparent operations, and the professional conduct that distinguishes legitimate naval forces from maritime militias. 3 minutes later, radar operators completed their threat assessment. They'd positively identified a Chinese Navy Type 052D destroyer with a moderate to high threat classification. Inside Princeton's Combat Information Center, the tactical action officer monitored the destroyer's trajectory with practiced composure. His ship carried 122 vertical launch cells packed with sufficient firepower to obliterate any Chinese vessel. The SPI radar, the planet's most sophisticated naval sensor system, painted every detail of the approaching warship with crystal clarity. At current velocity, the Chinese destroyer would reach weapons engagement range in 17 minutes. The mathematics were straightforward yet terrifying for China. Their YJ-18 anti-ship missiles could traverse the distance in under 4 minutes post-launch. However, Princeton's SM-6 interceptors in surface attack mode possessed a 240 nautical mile reach, more than enough to neutralize any incoming threat. At 09:29, when the captain requested probable hostile intent analysis, the answer crystallized immediately. At present speed and bearing, the Chinese warship would achieve the weapons release range within 14 minutes. The recommendation: sound general quarters. The captain's response embodied pure American naval confidence. Let's observe how desperately they want to humiliate themselves first. The South China Sea teemed with commercial traffic, 46 merchant vessels within 50 miles, all depending on U.S. Navy presence to guarantee safe passage. A Singapore-flagged container ship hauling semiconductors. A South Korean LNG tanker valued at $200 million. Every vessel would face jeopardy if Beijing succeeded in transforming international waters into exclusive Chinese territory. That would require defeating the U.S. Navy in combat, something that's never occurred in recorded history. At 09:30, Princeton's cooperative engagement capability instantly transmitted threat data across the entire strike group. The Nimitz herself, 104,600 tons of floating American power projection carrying 90 of the world's most advanced combat aircraft, adjusted flight operations with mechanical precision. Destroyers Chung Hoon and Kidd repositioned to establish defensive stations around the carrier, creating a formation that would transform any Chinese attack into a suicide mission. 5 minutes later, the tactical situation escalated dramatically. The E-2D Hawkeye, orbiting at 25,000 feet and providing comprehensive surveillance across 400 miles, detected multiple aircraft launching from Chinese carrier Shandong. Radar signatures matched J-15 fighters climbing aggressively southward. Air controllers immediately noticed something remarkable. The J-15s struggled for altitude, handicapped by fuel limitations inherent to their ski jump launch system. 60 seconds later, sonar operators detected the final component of China's coordination attempt: a submerged contact 80 nautical miles distant. Acoustic signature analysis identified a Type 039 diesel-electric submarine. The revealing detail? The submarine generated noise comparable to a freight train. Any competent submarine crew would have been mortified. China wasn't simply being aggressive. They were executing a multi-domain intimidation campaign using obsolete equipment, surface vessels from the 1990s, carrier aircraft incapable of launching with full weapons loads, submarines broadcasting their positions like maritime beacons. This was textbook bullying, effective only against weak or frightened opponents. Unfortunately for Beijing, they'd just challenged the wrong navy in the wrong ocean. The U.S. Navy had perfected blue water dominance since 1914, and Chinese forces were about to receive an education in why American naval power remains unmatched. By 0937, USS Nimitz's flight deck erupted into the controlled chaos that only American carriers have truly mastered. FA-18E Super Hornets from VFA-14, top hatters launched via catapults at 45-second intervals, a precision operation that Chinese carriers dependent on inefficient ski jumps couldn't remotely match. Steam billowed from catapult tracks as American naval aviation demonstrated its signature capability, projecting overwhelming power. The 1st Division of Super Hornets climbed through 15,000 feet, their AN/APG-79 ASO radars already tracking incoming J-15s at maximum range. The technological disparity was staggering. The APG-79's active electronically scanned array with thousands of transmit-receive modules could simultaneously track dozens of targets, while J-15's mechanically scanned radars swept methodically back and forth, broadcasting their positions to anyone monitoring. The J-15s struggled for altitude, a painful consequence of Shandong's ski jump limitations. Without catapults, they launched with reduced fuel and weapons capacity, climbing hard to gain energy advantage while burning fuel at accelerated rates. Meanwhile, American fighters launched at full combat weight with fuel reserves to spare, carrying weapons rated for maximum lethality. Beyond visible advantages, every F-18 connected via Link 16, sharing sensor data in real time. When one aircraft detected something, all aircraft received that information instantaneously. Chinese pilots relied on voice communications and individual sensors, like fighting a networked team while blindfolded. The technological gap wasn't measured in years, but decades. EA-18G Growlers entered combat without firing a single shot. These electronic warfare specialists carried ALQ-99 jamming pods capable of disrupting enemy electronics from 100 miles away. As they established jamming orbits, Chinese communications fragmented. On Chinese radar displays, ghost contacts multiplied exponentially. American fighters appeared and vanished, multiplied and merged. What appeared as 4 F-18s became 12, then 20. Radar locks broke and reformed constantly. J-15 pilots found themselves fighting phantoms while real threats maneuvered undetected. Americans executed a tactical formation called the Wall, a defensive arrangement perfected over decades. High combat air patrol at 35,000 feet, medium at 25,000, low at 15,000. Multiple overlapping engagement zones with mutual support, leaving nowhere for Chinese fighters to maneuver without entering someone's weapons envelope. The Americans had Chinese forces trapped 3 times over. Chinese formation remained clustered, a necessity when data links can't support distributed operations. They maintained visual contact for coordination, making them predictable and vulnerable. Their J-15s might appear impressive in propaganda imagery, but in actual combat, they were flying museum pieces against 21st-century warfare systems. At ERO 943, the RC-135W rivet joint provided critical intelligence. This modified Boeing 707 had been conducting surveillance for 6 hours, its electronic intelligence equipment cataloging every Chinese emission. Mandarin linguists aboard intercepted revealing communications, Chinese pilots requesting permission for aggressive maneuvers, specifically clearance to buzz American ships. They were escalating but asking permission first. American pilots trained to seize initiative found this approach tactically absurd. By the time Beijing approved anything, tactical situations would have shifted multiple times. Meanwhile, Princeton's defense systems tracked every threat with mechanical precision. Her SPY radar, capable of detecting baseball-sized objects beyond 165 miles, made the Chinese destroyer appear massive. Fire control solutions updated continuously. At 0947 hours, the John Chong crossed a threshold that would trigger immediate retaliation from any other navy. Her Type 346A phased array radar ceased searching mode and achieved fire control quality lock on USS Nimitz. In naval warfare doctrine, this represents one step from launching missiles, the electromagnetic equivalent of pointing a loaded weapon at someone. Inside Princeton's Combat Information Center, response was immediate yet measured. American discipline, refined through countless training exercises, held firm. China was betting American restraint against their aggression. They were about to learn that restraint doesn't indicate inability. Princeton's own fire control radars remained in standby mode. Her 122 vertical launch cells contained sufficient firepower to send John Chong to the ocean floor within seconds. SM-6 missiles capable of reaching 240 kilometers, SM-2s in surface attack mode, all ready to transform the destroyer into an artificial reef. Every firing solution continuously updated. The Chinese destroyer faced threats from multiple systems at multiple angles with zero survival probability if situations escalated. The fire control lock persisted for exactly 30 seconds, long enough to claim potential attack capability, insufficient to trigger American self-defense protocols. This was choreographed aggression against the wrong opponent. Princeton's crew documented everything: timestamps, signal characteristics, bearing data, intelligence invaluable in actual warfare. Despite the Chinese ship terminating its radar illumination, events were far from concluded. In the air, a J-15 pilot decided to demonstrate personal recklessness, breaking formation and diving toward an F-18 in what fighter pilots call a thump, an aggressive close pass intended to intimidate. The American pilot, trained at Top Gun where such maneuvers constitute basic training, simply rolled inverted and positioned behind the Chinese fighter. For 3 seconds, the American maintained perfect firing solution. His helmet-mounted display showed Chinese fighter engines glowing hot in infrared. One trigger squeeze would send an AIM-9X Sidewinder straight into the J-15's exhaust. He didn't squeeze. Professional discipline prevailed. The moment passed, but China still had one card to play. Chinese escalation peaked when their submarine made its critical move. The Type 039 diesel-electric boat had been approaching slowly, using thermal layers to mask its presence. At 0951, it committed a fatal tactical error, raising its snorkel to recharge batteries. Tau, sonar, subsurface contact bearing 159, range 15,000 yards. Contact is snorkeling. Classified as probable Type 039. He's making noise like a freight train. The submarine. Captain either didn't know or didn't care that Princeton's SQQ-89 sonar suite had been tracking him for the past hour. The system had cataloged his acoustic signature and fixed his position to within meters. If combat commenced, he'd have approximately 12 seconds to contemplate his decisions before an ASROC anti-submarine rocket transformed his vessel into marine debris. The tactical picture had become a textbook example of catastrophic naval operations. Chinese forces had positioned themselves in a tactical box: carrier northwest, destroyer west, submarine southwest. If shooting started, none would survive the first 5 minutes. Americans were about to demonstrate exactly how that would unfold. At 14:30 hours, USS Nimitz launched everything capable of flight. 48 aircraft roared off her deck in the largest single-carrier air power display in years. Super Hornets loaded with live weapons. EA-18G Growlers carrying electronic warfare packages capable of blacking out entire cities. E-2D Hawkeyes commanding the electromagnetic high ground. The afternoon sky darkened with American aircraft. Growlers initiated operations first. Their ALQ-99 pods operating at maximum power transformed Chinese radar screens into abstract art. False contacts materialized by the hundreds. Real aircraft vanished into electronic noise. Shandong's air defense picture resembled someone had thrown paint at displays. Chinese controllers couldn't distinguish genuine threats from phantoms. Everything registered as a threat. Then came the submarine demonstration. A Virginia-class attack submarine had been shadowing Chinese formation for 8 days. Silent, invisible, patient. At 15:47, she surfaced 6 nautical miles from Shandong, close enough for Chinese lookouts to observe her with unaided vision. The psychological impact was devastating. 8 days of undetected operations. Their entire anti-submarine screen, helicopters, sonobuoys, hull-mounted sonar, had failed to detect the 7,900-ton American submarine. In actual warfare, their carrier would already be destroyed. The submarine's commanding officer ordered emergency surface purely for psychological effect. The submarine burst from water like a breaching whale, water cascading off her hull in afternoon sunlight. Photographers on Chinese vessels captured perfect images of American dominance. After approximately 90 seconds, sufficient time to be observed, photographed, and reported, she submerged again. The message was unmistakable. We dominate the undersea domain. Back in the air, American fighters demonstrated air combat maneuvering at the expense of increasingly desperate Chinese pilots. The J-15s, already low on fuel from ski jump launches and hard climbs to altitude, found themselves unable to match American turn rates. Each engagement concluded identically. American fighters in firing positions, Chinese fighters defensive and burning precious fuel reserves. One by one, Chinese fighters disengaged, returning to Shandong with near-empty tanks, their combat endurance exhausted in futile attempts to match American capabilities. They landed with emergency fuel levels. Some probably experienced bingo fuel warnings they'd only seen in simulators. By 1623, Shandong's carrier strike group commenced withdrawal. Official Chinese communications referenced completing scheduled exercises, but everyone understood reality. They'd come to demonstrate Chinese naval power to intimidate lawful navigation, to claim waters beyond their sovereignty. Instead, they'd received a comprehensive lesson in why the South China Sea functions as America's domain in the Pacific theater.